the vast darkness of space echoed with the remnants of an ancient war. For 800,000 years, civilizations had battled across countless star systems, their conflicts burning brighter than the stars themselves. The Krill Empire, once a powerful force of technological might, had long ago lost its original purpose, becoming nothing more than a machine of endless destruction. Jay Park watched the holographic displays, his dark eyes reflecting the countless battle formations that stretched across multiple star clusters. Humanity had been nothing more than a whisper in this cosmic conflict, a young species barely noticed by the older, more established civilizations that had been fighting since before humans had discovered fire. The bridge of the research vessel was quiet, filled with the soft hum of advanced technology. Screens flickered with data streams that mapped centuries of conflict, red markers showing destroyed worlds, blue lines tracing the movement of massive fleet formations, and green indicators marking the zones of temporary peace that never lasted. No one truly remembered how the war began. Historians from various races had long since given up trying to trace its origins. What started as a territorial dispute between the Krill Empire and the orbital domains had evolved into a complex web of revenge, resource competition, and pure survival. Billions of beings had died. Entire planetary systems had been reduced to cosmic dust. Technological advancements came so quickly that weapons from just a century ago seemed like primitive tools compared to the planet-destroying arsenals now common in the conflict. Jay's fingers moved across the holographic interface, pulling up detailed records of previous engagements. The Quantum Collective, another major player in this endless war, had developed shields that could repel entire nuclear arsenals. The orbital domains had created ships that could literally fold space around themselves, becoming invisible to conventional detection. But humans were different. They watched. They learned. They adapted. The research vessel collected data continuously, its advanced sensors probing the depths of space where other civilizations saw only emptiness. Every piece of information was a potential weapon, every anomaly a possible breakthrough. Una Kim, the chief engineer, approached Jay with a datapad. Her hands moved quickly, highlighting complex mathematical equations that seemed to dance across the screen. "Look," she said quietly, "there's a pattern in their defensive networks that no one has noticed before." Jay studied the information. Most commanders would have dismissed it as complex mathematical noise. But humans had a unique ability to see connections where others saw only chaos. Outside the ship's viewing port, distant explosions marked another battle in the endless conflict. Entire fleets moved like intricate chess pieces, destroying each other with weapons that could obliterate entire continents in seconds. Yet beneath this violent display, something was brewing, a potential change that no one could predict. The human research vessel continued its silent observation. Unlike other races that threw themselves into constant combat, humanity had chosen a different path. They studied. They analyzed. They prepared. Jay knew something was coming. A shift was approaching, not through massive military might, but through understanding. The endless war that had consumed civilizations for centuries was about to encounter something it had never seen before, a completely different approach to conflict. As another massive explosion lit up the distant star cluster, Jay Park allowed himself a slight smile. Humanity's moment was coming. And when it arrived, nothing would be the same again. The research vessel moved silently through the darkness, collecting data, watching, waiting. 800,000 years of war had created a complex tapestry of conflict. And soon, very soon, a single thread would be pulled that would unravel everything. The research facility on Mars looked like nothing special from the outside. Gray buildings blended into the rust-colored landscape, hiding the most advanced technological development center in human history. Inside, engineers and scientists worked on projects that would change the course of galactic warfare. Una Kim stood before a massive holographic display, her fingers dancing across complex mathematical projections. The USS Defiance wasn't just a ship, it was humanity's ultimate response to centuries of cosmic conflict. Every component had been designed with a single purpose: to break the rules of traditional warfare. The ship's quantum adaptive drive was unlike anything any civilization had ever conceived. Where other races built massive weapons that consumed entire planetary resources, humans focused on precision, intelligence, and unexpected solutions. the Defiance could potentially do what entire fleets had failed to do for hundreds of thousands of years. J. Park reviewed the technical specifications. Most military experts from other civilizations would have called the design impossible. The ship could theoretically exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously, making traditional targeting systems completely useless. Its adaptive neural network could process combat scenarios faster than any known artificial intelligence. During initial tests, the ship had demonstrated capabilities that defied conventional understanding. In simulated combat scenarios, the Defiance could predict and counter enemy movements before those movements were even initiated. It was like the ship could see into the future, reading the mathematical possibilities of conflict before they happened. The human approach was fundamentally different from other galactic civilizations. While the Krill Empire and orbital domains threw massive fleet formations at each other, humans studied patterns. They understood that true power wasn't about size, but about understanding complex systems. Dr. Hoon Lee, the lead quantum physicist, explained the core principle to a group of military commanders. "We're not just building a ship," he said, his voice calm and matter-of-fact. "We're creating a living system that can adapt faster than any enemy can respond." The Defiance's hull was constructed from adaptive metamaterials that could change molecular structure in milliseconds. Weapon systems weren't just powerful, they were intelligent. Each weapon could learn and modify its own approach based on enemy defensive configurations. No one outside the human research teams knew the full extent of the ship's capabilities. Information was carefully controlled, leaked only in small, calculated amounts. The galactic civilizations that had ignored humanity for centuries would soon discover their mistake. Yuna remembered the early days of development. Most alien intelligence reports had categorized humans as a minor species, technologically primitive, militarily insignificant. They saw human ships as basic, their technologies as crude. These assumptions would become their greatest weakness. The final assembly of the Defiance took place in a secure orbital facility. Thousands of engineers worked in perfect synchronization, each component tested and retested multiple times. Every system was designed with multiple backup protocols, every potential failure point carefully analyzed. Captain J. Park would lead the mission. He wasn't a traditional military commander. His background was in systems analysis, quantum mathematics, and complex problem solving. Where other captains saw obstacles, he saw opportunities. Where others saw chaos, he saw patterns waiting to be understood. The ship's first official test would be its most critical moment. Years of research, billions of dollars, and humanity's strategic future depended on a successful mission. One ship. 50 minutes. The potential to end an 800,000-year conflict. As the Defiance was prepared for launch, a sense of quiet anticipation filled the facility. This wasn't just another military vessel. This was humanity's statement to the galaxy, a declaration that they were no longer a forgotten species, but a force to be reckoned with. The countdown began. Systems activated. The quantum drive hummed with potential energy. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, civilizations that had fought for centuries had no idea what was coming. Humanity was ready. The Defiance was prepared. And everything was about to change. The mission seemed impossible from every strategic perspective. Penetrate the central defensive network of the orbital domains, a civilization that had maintained an impenetrable barrier for over 500,000 years. Every previous attempt by other races had resulted in total destruction. Captain J. Park studied the holographic star maps, his fingers tracing invisible lines of potential approach. The orbital domains had created a defensive system so complex that it could predict and neutralize threats before they even emerged. Thousands of advanced sensor networks, quantum-level detection systems, and automated defense platforms created a shield that no civilization had ever breached. Yuna Kim's quantum entanglement calculations offered the only potential solution. The Defiance would not attack the defensive network, it would essentially become invisible to it. By existing in multiple quantum states simultaneously, the ship could move through the most secure regions of space without triggering a single alarm. The mission parameters were brutally simple. Find the central quantum control node of the orbital domain's defensive network. Introduce a series of algorithmic disruptions that would cause the entire system to collapse from within. No massive weapons. No direct confrontation. Just pure, mathematical precision. Dr. Hoon Lee had spent years developing the specific algorithm that could potentially break the orbital domain's defensive systems. It wasn't about destroying their technology, it was about making their own systems turn against them. A digital virus so intelligent that it would appear as a natural system evolution. As the Defiance prepared for launch, the tension on the bridge was unlike any traditional military deployment. No loud commands. No dramatic speeches. Just a quiet, calculated focus that defined human strategic thinking. The ship's adaptive camouflage systems began to activate. To any external sensor, the Defiance would appear as nothing more than background radiation, a subtle echo in the vast darkness of space. Years of research had led to this moment of potential breakthrough. Initial scans showed the complexity of the orbital domain's defensive network. Millions of interconnected systems, each one capable of independent decision-making. Traditional military thinking would have seen this as an impenetrable fortress. The human team saw it as an intricate puzzle waiting to be solved. J. Park understood something that other civilizations had forgotten. In complex systems, absolute control was an illusion. Every network, no matter how advanced, had inherent vulnerabilities. The key was not to fight the system, but to understand its fundamental logic. As the Defiance approached the first defensive perimeter, nothing happened. No alarms. No defensive responses. The ship moved like a ghost through layers of technology that had destroyed entire civilizations for centuries. Una monitored the quantum entanglement drive, making microscopic adjustments that would be invisible to any external observation. Each movement was calculated to the smallest possible mathematical probability. One wrong calculation could mean instant destruction. The central control node came into view. A massive structure that looked like a crystalline network suspended in the darkness of space. Generations of alien civilizations had tried to understand its structure. Humans would do more than understand, they would exploit it. Dr. Hoon Lee's algorithm began its silent infiltration. It didn't attack the system directly. Instead, it became part of the system, moving like a natural evolutionary process. Subtle changes began to occur, tiny modifications that would ultimately create a complete systemic collapse. Captain Park watched the initial results with a calm, calculated focus. This wasn't about destruction. This was about demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to conflict. Precision. Intelligence. Understanding complex systems at their most fundamental level. The mission that seemed impossible was slowly becoming a reality. One ship. Countless calculations. A strategic approach that would change everything humans understood about warfare. The Defiance continued its silent approach, carrying with it the potential to end an 800,000-year conflict in less than an hour. No massive weapons. No dramatic explosions. Just pure, mathematical precision. Everything was about to change. The moment of truth arrived without fanfare. 50 minutes that would reshape galactic history began with a subtle quantum pulse from the Defiance's advanced systems. Captain J. Park watched the holographic displays with laser-focused concentration. Around him, the bridge crew moved with a precision that seemed almost inhuman. No shouting. No panic. Just calculated, deliberate actions. The orbital domain's defensive network began to experience its first anomalies. Tiny disruptions appeared, so small that initial monitoring systems didn't recognize them as threats. Dr. Hoon Lee's algorithm worked like a microscopic cancer, spreading through complex technological networks with surgical precision. Communication channels started to collapse first. Massive fleet formations suddenly found themselves unable to coordinate. Defensive platforms began sending conflicting signals. What had been an impenetrable shield was now becoming a confused mess of technological noise. Una Kim monitored the quantum entanglement systems, her fingers dancing across multiple holographic interfaces. The Defiance wasn't just attacking, it was systematically dismantling an entire civilization's defensive infrastructure from within. The Krill Empire, long-standing enemies of the orbital domains, watched in disbelief. Their most advanced sensors could detect something happening, but couldn't understand the mechanism of destruction. One single human ship was doing what entire fleets had failed to do for centuries. Weapon systems across multiple star clusters began to turn against their own creators. Defensive platforms that had been online for thousands of years suddenly became useless. The complex, interconnected network that had maintained the galactic conflict was being unraveled by a series of mathematical interventions. J. Park's strategy was brutally simple. Don't fight the system. Become the system. Understand its logic so completely that you can make it destroy itself. Massive space stations went dark. Fleet communication networks collapsed. Defensive platforms that had protected civilizations for millennia became nothing more than expensive metal structures floating in space. The Defiance moved silently, almost elegantly through the chaos it was creating. No massive weapons fired. No traditional combat maneuvers executed. Just pure, intelligent system manipulation. Quantum-level disruptions spread faster than any conventional communication could track. The orbital domain's most advanced technologies were turning against themselves, creating a cascade of systemic failures that no one could predict or stop. 30 minutes into the operation, entire civilizations realized something fundamental was happening. The continuous war that had consumed generations was being dismantled by a single human ship. Dr. Hoon Lee's algorithm worked like a living entity. It didn't just break systems, it understood them. Each defensive mechanism became a new opportunity for further infiltration. The more the system tried to protect itself, the more vulnerable it became. Yoona Kim watched in quiet amazement. Humanity had done what no other civilization could conceptualize. They had turned a civilization's own complexity against itself. The final 15 minutes were a masterclass in strategic destruction. Communication networks collapsed entirely. Defensive systems became nothing more than expensive decorations. Entire fleet formations became completely inoperable. Captain J. Park's final log entry was simple and direct. Sometimes, understanding is more powerful than fighting. As the 50 minutes concluded, the galactic landscape had fundamentally changed. Civilizations that had been locked in continuous conflict for hundreds of thousands of years suddenly found themselves without the ability to continue their endless war. The Defiance had not fired a single traditional weapon. It had not destroyed a single physical structure. Yet it had accomplished what entire generations of military strategists had failed to do. One ship. 50 minutes. The end of an 800,000-year conflict. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage not with a massive military display, but with a surgical, precise intervention that would be studied for millennia to come. The silence that followed was more powerful than any explosion. The silence was deafening. Where massive battle formations once existed, only scattered debris now floated in the cold emptiness of space. Civilizations that had fought for centuries suddenly found themselves without a purpose. Captain J. Park stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the holographic displays that showed the complete transformation of galactic power structures. What had taken 800,000 years of continuous conflict had been dismantled in just 50 minutes. The first communications came slowly. Alien diplomatic channels, long dormant, began to activate. Representatives from the Krill Empire, the orbital domains, and the Quantum Collective reached out not with threats, but with confusion and a strange sense of relief. Yoona Kim analyzed the initial response data. The conflict that had consumed generations had been more of a systemic habit than a genuine necessity. Civilizations had been fighting simply because fighting was all they knew how to do. Humanity's approach was completely unprecedented. They hadn't conquered through traditional military might. They had solved a complex problem by understanding its fundamental structure. This was more than a military victory, it was a philosophical revolution. Dr. Hoon Lee received the first formal communications. Alien scientific teams were desperate to understand how a single ship could dismantle systems that had been considered impenetrable for millennia. Humans had introduced a new concept to galactic warfare: intelligent system manipulation. The economic implications were staggering. Trillions of resources that had been consumed by continuous warfare could now be redirected. Entire industries built around conflict suddenly found themselves obsolete. Weapon manufacturers, military research centers, and defensive technology companies would need to completely reinvent themselves. Diplomatic meetings began to happen. Not the tense, aggressive negotiations of the past, but genuine conversations about potential cooperation. Humans had shown that there were alternatives to endless conflict. J. Park understood the deeper significance. This wasn't just about ending a war. It was about demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to problem solving. Understanding complex systems was more powerful than any weapon. The Defiance became more than a ship. It became a symbol of a new way of thinking. Alien civilizations began sending research teams, hoping to understand the technologies and strategies that had made such a transformation possible. Yuna Kim found herself at the center of unprecedented scientific interest. Her quantum entanglement research, once considered theoretical, was now the most sought-after knowledge in the galaxy. Universities and research centers from multiple civilizations requested detailed information about human technological approaches. The transformation wasn't just technological. It was philosophical. Civilizations that had been locked in conflict for centuries suddenly had to reimagine their entire existence. What do you do when the primary purpose of your civilization suddenly disappears? Humanitarian aid became the new focus. The resources previously used for warfare could now be redirected to solve complex scientific and social challenges. Space exploration programs that had been dormant for generations suddenly received massive funding. Captain Park gave a simple statement that would be quoted for generations: conflict is a failure of understanding. Solutions exist beyond destruction. The Defiance continued its mission of exploration and research. It was no longer just a military vessel, but a symbol of humanity's potential to solve complex problems through intelligence and understanding. Alien civilizations began to study human history, looking for clues to this unique approach. They discovered a species that had consistently solved problems through innovation, adaptation, and a willingness to challenge existing systems. Dr. Hoon Lee was invited to multiple planetary conferences. His presentations about systemic thinking and complex problem solving became required learning for diplomatic and military academies across different civilizations. The war that had consumed 800,000 years was over. And it had ended not with a massive battle, but with a demonstration of intelligent, precise intervention. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage. Not as conquerors. Not as warriors. But as problem solvers who showed that understanding was the most powerful weapon of all. The universe watched and learned.